Hi class, Mrs. Calvi here. Quick review on congruent figures. So we are looking at the definition of congruent, which means same size, same shape. And if you look at the picture that I have here, it says identify any congruent figure. So in figure A on the checkerboard, it says the squares on the checkerboard are congruent. They are the same size and the same shape, all of the squares, the black and red squares. The checkers are also congruent because the checkers are the same size, same shape. Looking at B, the target, the rings on a target are not congruent because each ring is larger than the one inside of it. So they, even though are the same shape, they are not the same size. So in order for something to be congruent, they have to be the same size and the same shape. Okay, so we have something called the side, side, side rule. It says if all of the corresponding sides and angles of two polygons are congruent, then the polygons are congruent. So first of all, you need to know what a polygon is. All right, so a polygon is, first of all, it's a two-dimensional figure, which means it's flat, okay? It's not 3D. It is a closed figure, and I just noticed I spelled figure wrong, R-E. Sorry, guys. And it also has no curved lines, okay? So going back to what the side, side, side rule is. If all corresponding sides, and we learned about corresponding sides in the earlier video, and angles of both polygons are congruent, meaning same size, same shape, then that means the polygons are congruent. So for triangles, so let's say I had two triangles. And I'm not great, but you're going to pretend they're pretty much the same. So let's say I had triangle A, B, C, and D, E, F. It says for triangles, if the corresponding sides are congruent, so I'm going to use tick marks to show which ones are corresponding. So I'm going to say AB corresponds to DE, BC corresponds to EF, and CA corresponds to FD. So I'm basically reading what this is saying. If the corresponding sides are congruent, and you know they're congruent, meaning if they're the same, then the corresponding angles will always be congruent. So if in these two triangles, AB was congruent, corresponded to DE, that means they have the same measurement. BC and EF would have the same measurement, and CA and FD would have the same measurement. If all of their side measurements are congruent, the angles inside are automatically congruent. They are the same. So which means that angle A corresponds to angle D, and they have the exact same measurement. Angle B has the same measurement as E, and angle C has the same measurement as F. Now, this is called the side, side, side rule. Now, because of this rule, when determining whether triangles are congruent, you only need to determine whether the sides are congruent. So if the sides are congruent, then you know that the two figures or the two polygons are congruent. So to be more specific, if side AB, let's say, was 5 centimeters and DE was 5 centimeters. Let's say FE was 3 centimeters, CB was 3 centimeters, FD was 5 centimeters, and CA was 5 centimeters. So the corresponding sides are congruent, meaning they're the same measurement. Then that means both of these triangles are congruent to each other. Because we automatically know if their sides are congruent, their angles will be congruent. Okay, so looking at this example, determine whether the triangles are congruent. So we're going to think about the side, side, side rule. We said if their corresponding sides were congruent, then that means their corresponding angles are congruent, and then both figures are congruent. So now this is what I was talking about in the video from the other day. These figures are not positioned the same way. If you see, this one is flipped compared to this triangle. So you have to make sure that you're looking at the correct corresponding sides and angles because they are not positioned correctly. They're not positioned in the same way. So here, I'm going to look to see if their corresponding sides have the same lengths or measurements. Well, so I see here I have a right angle, right? So if I'm looking at straight here is a right angle. So from top to bottom, right? So if I say side BA, I want to know which side that corresponds to over here. Well, that corresponds to ED. So I'm going to put my tick marks. So one tick mark, one tick mark. I know those sides correspond to each other. Well, this is the diagonal. So side BC corresponds to EF because those are both the diagonal lines. So I know BC corresponds to EF. And then the bottom, AC, corresponds to, now how would I actually say this? I want to say it in the same direction, right? So look, I'm going from my 90-degree angle, so I'm saying AC. AC corresponds, I have to start with my 90-degree angle, DF, all right? So now let's look to see if these two triangles are congruent. We're going to look to see if their corresponding sides are congruent, which means equal. So tick mark 1 is 4 meters, tick mark 1 is 4 meters. 2 tick marks, 5 meters, 2 tick marks, 5 meters. 3 tick marks, 3 meters, 3 tick marks, that's a 3 under there. So all of their corresponding sides are congruent, which means equal or the same. So that means I know all of their angle measurements. I don't even need to know their angle measurements. I know that these are congruent. So that tells me that triangle ABC is, and if you remember, the equal sign with the little squiggly line above it from our vocabulary means congruent. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. I have to label it in the same direction. So I'm starting at my 90-degree angle and I'm going up. A, B, C. I'm starting at my 90-degree angle and I'm going up. D, E, F. Okay. So now we're talking about figures that have more than 3 sides. All right. So just as when we were talking about similar figures and their proportions, it's kind of similar to congruent figures. So we cannot just look at their side lengths and know if they are congruent, just like we couldn't look at that for similar figures and knew that they were similar or not. So it says for polygons with more than 3 sides, it is not enough to compare the measures of their sides. For example, the corresponding sides of the figures below are congruent, but the figures are not congruent. So what that means is the corresponding sides are congruent, meaning they have the same measurement. So if you notice here, the rectangle, it's 120 meters on the top. The parallelogram is 120 meters on the top. The rectangle has 70 meters down the side. The parallelogram is 70 meters down the side. 120 meters at the bottom of the rectangle, 120 meters at the bottom of the parallelogram, 70 meters on the left side of the rectangle, 70 meters on the left side of the parallelogram. So the side lengths are congruent, but that does not mean that our figures are congruent. So, and the reason we know that is these are 90-degree angles because they have that little box, right? These angle measurements are not the same. The angle measurements are not the same. So the side lengths, the corresponding sides are congruent, but the figures are not congruent because they do not have congruent angle measurements. All right. So here we are looking to see, we're trying to use congruency to find unknown angle measurements. So it says the corresponding angles of congruent polygons are going to be congruent. So if you notice, corresponding angle here is 87 degrees. That corresponding angle in this figure is 87 degrees. 62 degrees, the corresponding angle is 62 degrees. 118 degrees, the corresponding angle is 118 degrees. And if this one here is 93 degrees, we know that this missing angle measurement is going to be 93 degrees. All right. So looking at B. So again, for A, the figures were positioned in the same way. So they were in the same position. If you notice for B, they are not in the same position. Okay. This one is turned a little bit where this one is kind of facing straight up. So you just have to make sure that you're looking at the correct corresponding sides. So here it says the corresponding sides of congruent polygons are congruent. So what is our missing side A going to measure? Well, side A, it corresponds to this side in this figure. So if this is 3 centimeters, the length of A is going to be 3 centimeters. Okay, so identifying congruent triangles and being able to tell whether figures are congruent, you're going to be looking at their angle measurements as well as their side lengths and their corresponding side lengths. All right, that is it for now, and I will talk to you guys soon.